Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cosmic Tape Music Club podcast. I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Augustus.
Together we're the Galaxy Electric, and we host a private group on Facebook called the Cosmic Tape Music Club, and it has inspired us to make these podcast episodes. It has been a while. It's been a couple years actually since we've made one. So I just wanted to talk about why we decided to do one now. But before I do that, I will say this episode is going to be about Charanjit Singh. And if you've never heard that name before, we're really, really excited to be part of your journey of learning about him. And if you have, then I'm sure you know why we're doing this. So a couple years ago, we started exploring a new sound. We had been making, our cosmic tape music. We'd been making albums and releasing stuff. You may know about that.
A term we've coined pretty much anyway.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
We're like, what music is this that we're making? We have to give it a name. And when we had some time to explore a new sound, Augustus, brought me into his world of what got him into music production in the first place, which was electronic dance music. And so we, as we like to do on this podcast, is go to the origins of things. We wanted to explore the origins of that. So we went all the way back to the origins of house music. And I feel like I'm speaking for you a little bit in this because this was kind of your journey that you brought me into. And then we shared it with, everyone since we've been releasing this music.
Well, I was going to be like, picture it. It's 1996. But then I thought, that might be... We'll get into that eventually, but for now, let's just say I was very inspired by music that was happening in the late 90s and early 2000s in the underground club scene, mainly coming out of the UK, but, also stuff that was happening here stateside because that's where I was living. And it was inspiring to the point, when I first got into it, I didn't even think about the idea of trying to make the music. I was just completely blown away by what I was hearing, and which led me eventually to the curiosity to want to DJ it at least. And I noticed there were other people playing records of this music, and so I was like, ooh, how do I get some of those? What are they playing it on? I traded my bass for some turntables, and the rest is history.
I was gonna say, that's how it all starts.
And I started acquiring records and started practicing DJing, and then I met people that would allow me to DJ at their house, and then I would play little afternoon gigs at coffee shops and stuff like that. And then eventually I got to play at some actual nightclubs, and it was a lot of fun. And eventually I decided well, I want to learn how this music is made. And got into samplers and synths, and it kind of set me on this path that I'm still on today. And as Jacqueline was saying, I invited her into my world of making electronic music.
Well, specifically for the dance floor, that was something that, if you're listening to this may be you. People were asking us, because we like to take feedback and requests from people who listen to our music and are part of our club and everything. They were saying your music's really interesting and experimental, but what if there was a consistent beat to it? So I was kind of taking that feedback and kind of what Gus was inspired by at the time. And we decided, let's explore what does it sound like if the Galaxy Electric makes house music? And it led us on this crazy journey, and we've been releasing that music to our secret club. So our Cosmic Tape Music Club is a private group on Facebook, but it's free and anyone can join. We have a private membership called the Vortex, and we've been giving them this secret music we've been making.
It's not so secret anymore.
They help us decide which of the songs, we have 30 plus songs we've made, which of those get publicly released. Enough about us. Anyway, the reason we're doing this is because we've been on this journey personally. And when we went back to the origins of house music, a lot of people were pointing us to this kind of mysterious concept that outside of Chicago and Detroit, there was actually someone in India who accidentally invented acid house, which is kind of where we landed accidentally ourselves in exploring house. We explored, traditional house and deep house, and then we ended up in this acid house world that we've been really happy to be playing in. And it seems to pair really well with the Buchla as well. So people who've been in our world have been pointing us to Charanjit Singh, who is considered the accidental, inventor of acid house music, when traditionally it's considered something that was invented in Chicago in the 80s. But he made an album in 1982 called, there's a couple different ways that it's described, but it's called 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat, but sometimes it's called Charanjit Singh Synthesizing, 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat. So you'll see it written different ways.
Where was he living at the time?
And so we can get into all of that. But anyway, it's kind of controversial and mysterious and cosmic, so I feel like it fits perfectly with our cosmic conversations we like to have on this podcast, where it's like there's a mythology around the idea of how things got invented, but everything kind of happens, in and outside of time. Like, it's happening at the same time across the globe, but it's also happening outside of time because it's being discovered way after the fact. So I love playing around in those kinds of conversations. So if you have a strong feeling about this, we'd love to hear it. We're not saying this is definitively like, the encyclopedic podcast about him or about acid house. We're just excited to be exploring this from our kind of point of view.
And previously we'd experienced those kind of synchronicities in the tape music world. Yeah. Where it was well before the internet, and even, the means of people being able to like contact each other easily, and now we're covering, it's, fast forward to the 80s, it's still happening. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we still don't have that internet connection yet, so we're still playing around in that cosmic way where it's like, did this happen first? Did this person know about this? Could they have known about it? I don't think so. I think we're still on the edge there.
In a way, you still had to gallop on your horse to give word to someone that something is happening, and hopefully you get there in time.
So Charanjit Singh was born actually in 1940 in what was Bombay, which is now Mumbai. So I'm probably going to call it Mumbai from now on, but it was Bombay when he was born. And he was a composer. He was a musician. He was a session musician for Bollywood film soundtracks. There's not a lot that
Tell me a little bit about Bollywood in general.
Yeah, so I actually didn't do as much research on Bollywood or the scores that he did for Bollywood as I did for what ragas are, because that's the album we're exploring more. So I'm not going to give you like a history of Bollywood or anything, because that's for someone else
to
tell you about.
What is it?
Oh, it's the Hollywood of India.
Okay.
Right. So he was the go-to session musician for if you wanted synthesizer sounds eventually. Or like experimental different types of sounds. He was like this go-to guy for like the top Bollywood film producers, composers, that they wanted to bring him in. I read a quote somewhere of one of them that was like, if you needed like a cool synthesizer sound or something, like I don't even know if they had the language for it because it was so new, but he was like kind of a pioneer in that sense. So they would be like, oh, we need some weird sounds, let's bring Charanjit in. But before that, he was like bass and guitar mostly, and keys. He's like a very good keys player.
Which were still sort of experimental instruments in the time that he was playing them. Mm-hmm. We're talking like 60s, 70s, right? Yeah.
So he was like in the golden era of Bollywood. He was like one of the main guys. There was actually this core group of 4 guys that were like, they formed like a band that toured worldwide to play the songs from these films in like big concerts around the world.
Oh, very cool.
He was part of that. So I feel like he really got this cool experience of being in the right place at the right time, which is like a common theme with the people we study. Just born at the right time, in the right place, with the right attitude, with the right skills and the right curiosity to be like right in the center of things. And basically the way he kind of got into what ended up becoming, the invention of acid house is that he actually made an album. There's 2 things that I thought were really interesting. The fact that I was like, how did he know about all these different cool synthesizers? Well, he was traveling worldwide, in a band that was successful, doing these film composition, playing them live as a band. So he was traveling worldwide. So that explains one of the things I had a question about. But the other is that he eventually, before he made this album, he made a album called Charanjit Singh Plays Hit Tunes on the Synthesizer from this film called Silsila, which was like a big film at the time. And he made synthesizer renditions of these songs and made an album of it. So before he did the 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat, he was already doing synthesizer renditions.
Sounds like he was using that as a springboard to sort of learn the instrument. He was like, ooh, I really love synthesizers from what I've heard. Like, how do I make this work for me? I'll start by recreating some of my other work.
Yeah, I mean, most of us
like
start as cover bands or cover artists, right? Like, when I was being trained in music, I wasn't playing my own compositions. I was playing, the classical music that was being put in front of me. And I was learning about music arrangement from, long dead people.
Speaking of us making house music, when we first started making house music, I was pretty much like doing as much as I could to figure out like what the sound of house music even is, in terms of like what sounds, how's the sausage being made, like what sounds are actually involved, like what drums. I had a rough idea, but I didn't actually know in practice like what was gonna work. So I think that's a pretty common thing when you have a vision for something that you want to do, but there may be sort of a learning curve and learning, how to actually like play the instrument, or, in the case of electronic music, how to program the instrument.
It gives you some material to work with to get to know the instrument and how it functions. That's a good point. Because
if you start on an initial patch, for those that have, it's a pretty boring sound that you're going to hear. So yeah, you want to like learn how to shape it into the various types of sounds you might hear in your head, and that can take quite a bit of effort. And as we'll probably learn, Charanjit Singh took quite a long time to get there before he made his masterpiece.
Yeah, right. So he didn't just like come out the gate and invent acid house. He was already experimenting with different instrumentation within orchestras and composition groups for film soundtracks, and then he was making this album where he was then taking the music he's really familiar with but doing it with synthesizers. I don't know exactly what synthesizers. I should have looked that up. There's not, like I said, it's not a big old long Wikipedia or books I can find about him. I was having to piece this together from interviews and videos I found of him talking, and I was really trying to go to like him talking about it versus other people, because I feel like there's so many layers removed, it gets so mythologized, and then everyone argues about what's true. But he was using, so before, again, right before this,
the before times,
he was in his Bollywood film soundtrack making, he was using the clavioline, the farfisa transichord, and he had a minichord and a polymoog.
That's right.
So he was already at the forefront of this stuff. I mean, if this is the 70s, and nobody else knew what he was doing or what he was using. It wasn't like he was part of a big community or had access to the stuff in a way that was like, oh yeah, you can just go down to the shop and get these. He was traveling the world and like ordering stuff.
Well, even that stuff that he has at this stage that you're talking about, probably took a good bit of effort to obtain.
Yeah, exactly.
And to have delivered, or to pick it up, to bring it to, where he was residing.
Mm-hmm. This is what I was thinking too. So those are some pretty classic sounds, and I can see why they were like a gateway for him to be like, I need more. I need to know more. But the main like linchpin moment, let me just make sure in my notes that I didn't miss anything important.
Seems like he cared a lot about polyphony, just
yeah,
like in terms of those instruments you've already mentioned, they all have that in common. I don't think, I don't hear of a Model D in there, which certainly would have existed at the time.
That's a good point.
So yeah, he was really interested in the ability to play multiple voices at the same time with his synthesizers, it seems.
And I can say from listening to the other synthesizer type albums that he made covering Bollywood stuff, it is very much that. It reminded me of like, oh, these are those albums that people would be like, hey, I don't think the synthesizer's gonna be it. You know what I mean? Like they kind of have that cheesiness to them where you're like, yeah, I think I'll just listen to the original orchestral arrangements. But it's like, it's a bridge to what's to come. And we wouldn't get there if people weren't willing to experiment with it.
Yeah, and if you came from the film soundtrack side of things, even to this day, you're usually very much on your own, producing stuff in your own project studio, composing that type of music, so he was probably trying to do something that he could do at home, rather than having to constantly rent out studio time or pay for his own studio time.
Well, if you think of it too, like we talk about this a lot, like what he's doing as a session musician, he doesn't get creative say as much. That's his day job, right? Mm-hmm. He has to show up when they tell him. He has to perform what they tell him. He has to, collaborate with everybody in the room to make sure he's not the star of the show. He's not the creative force of it, right? It's his day job.
It's
just a gig. So when he goes home, it's like, how can I have this outlet still to be my own creative force by myself?
Oh, we all know that that feeling, of like, it's fun to do the commission work and get paid for it, and it's probably very rewarding for those that do that, but then you always want to reserve a little for yourself. And I think this electronic music was what he was reserving for himself. Yeah,
he clearly had it stored up in him. So in 1981, the story goes that he was in Singapore. And I was always wondering, like, what brought him there? Why did he go to Singapore? But I wonder if it was a part of, like, a stop on his tour. Or maybe a place he had been before that he wanted to go back.
That he really liked.
But he was there by himself. At least not with his family. It wasn't like a family trip. He might have been there for work. But he went there and he saw the Roland fleet, right? And he placed an order. He took one of everything. We need to find out what that vocoder is, though. So he ordered the 303, the 808, and the Jupiter 8. And I'm going to find out which vocoder he used.
And that's the Roland TB303 bassline, the Roland TR808 analog drum machine, and the Roland Jupiter 8 polyphonic analog synth. All three of those instruments are sometimes called the Holy Trinity of dance music. So it's interesting that he chose those in particular because he probably paid a pretty penny for them as well, because when they first came out, they were top of the market. The company had to cover their expenses. Those of you who know a little bit about electronics and that sort of thing, like there was a lot of components involved in those instruments, so they were probably pretty costly to build, and they definitely retailed at a pretty high dollar amount. I don't have exact figures on those for you.
Ooh, that would be interesting to find like an old advert for it.
And then convert it to the account for inflation. But we didn't do that.
No, I didn't do that. I also do not know which vocoder he used.
But it's interesting that he probably paid top dollar, whereas by the time the musicians who are officially credited with starting Acid House or creating Acid House, they got theirs at pawn shops after people had already bought them and said, what is this junk, and traded in or sold at a pawn shop or privately to fund what was very soon to come after, which is the first digital synthesizers. So everybody was onto those by the time Acid House was being made, and the analog stuff was considered like the old, why would you want this stuff, which to this day still blows everybody's mind. you know, when they hear about, you know, stories like somebody got sold a Jupiter 8 for $150 and the person put the $150 towards a DX7. You know, when you think about how much those are worth
cycle of gear
today, you know, that seems like an insane transaction.
Yeah.
So
if anybody knows which vocoder he used, I would love to know. I haven't been able to find that.
I did see a Korg VC10.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what he actually used, but that was the one that was being played on stage when he
came back in 2013.
Came back in 2013. Yeah.
Okay. And they said they tried to get him everything he actually used, but it was released by Korg in 1978, so that's possible that was the one he used.
It's also a very good sounding one. I
Interesting.
think it's the one Air plays. It's used quite a bit, you know, by
okay.
a good many folks. But I think Roland also had a vocoder. I don't know if you want to look that one up. I always forget what it's.
Well, we know he had a
called,
mini
but-
Korg, so it's not like he wasn't aware.
It might have been the Roland one because he's such a big fan of Roland. You know, like you think he just would. He wasn't.
He just got one of everything.
He
from
wasn't
Roland.
thinking too hard about this.
The
like,
VP03 or
no, that's like the
VP30.
new.
Oh, okay. So that's
Is it the 330?
VP330.
Yeah, is the vintage one. That's
it
the
came
one I
out
was thinking
1979 to 1980.
Yeah. So it might have been the VP330 by Roland.
Yeah, let's find out. Let's have somebody help us out with that.
It wouldn't be a Galaxy Electric podcast if we weren't asking for a little help from our audience.
Yeah, it's a conversation. So we love to make updates to what we're talking about. So anyway, he did. He ordered all of those, and he taught himself how to program them and work them together by reading the manuals. He said he spent a year just learning what they do and how to program them.
Boy, I can relate with that.
Yeah, so as a fellow manual reader, I'm sure you can relate. I can't imagine finding that creative or inspiring, but that was all he had. So what else was he going to do? You know, he gets these instruments and there's no one guiding him about them and no one that he knows that's used them before or in the way that he wants to. And he, by reading the manual, can understand every parameter and every angle of what's going on with it or maybe what it was intended for, so that then he can dive in and explore his ideas with it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, logically, I think it makes a lot of sense, you know. And
But yeah, to spend a whole year
see what
just
you're
like
saying.
learning some new instruments, I'm sure people were like, hey, can you come out and play? You know what I mean? Like,
but at some point you feel like, okay, now I've just become an expert on this device.
Yeah.
And I haven't done anything with it, you know, at all
Yeah.
with it yet. Like, and so that's kind of where the like programming the stuff, you know, from his previous films like comes into place. And what I was kind of saying about that is that makes a lot of sense to me because it's like, oh, well, I have to apply this knowledge in order for it to actually like, you know, be fruitful. And I feel like that was kind of his way of
he already
doing
had a
that.
muscle for that from the other projects that he
And
did.
then it was time for him to create.
Yeah, so I was going to say that's such a perfect bridge to what the creative element of this album and this concept was, which is that he wanted to play traditional classical Indian music, which it's called ragas. And again, I'm not an expert in this. I've just been learning it from learning about this album. So if you're an expert in that, I would love to hear from you. I've been digging into it myself a little bit, but basically there are these traditional melodies, I guess you would say, or scales that you improvise with. And they're tied to, you know, Hindu spirituality. So there's a lot of layers to it and it's thousands of years old. So there's a lot to explore. I mean, there's just books and books and books and books we could read on it and we would still not be experts. So just scratching the surface from his perspective. He said, you know, he's very familiar with these ragas as a classical Indian musician and they have this element of improvising with the scales. So he wanted to, instead of traditionally you would play these with a tabla player, and he wanted to replace the tabla player with the drum machines, specifically with a disco beat, because he said that's what was playing on the radio, and that's what he was kind of into, was these
So he wanted
disco
to put
beats.
the melodies to a disco
He wanted
beat.
to do the improvised
Gotcha.
melodies to a disco beat, and I think there was an element of like, he's so familiar with this form, and he wanted to add just this one element of modern energy to it. I've kind of heard him talk about this a little bit. That he wanted to bring something ancient with something modern, and that these new machines were like the perfect conduit for that. So
this was his bright idea.
So I feel like it is kind of this like channeled like cosmic lightning bolt type thing. So he replaced the tabla player with a disco beat, and he replaced kind of the tabla with the drum machines. And he wasn't going out to discos. He wasn't listening to like music. He said he never really intentionally listened to music or went to record stores and bought stuff. He just had a DJ station that he listened to a lot, that maybe that's what they were playing, and that's how he got exposed to the idea of disco, which again, there's a whole thread to how he was into disco and using that to make this album, and like disco is also the origins of house music, so there's like this really cool thread to that, even though it's happening across the globe. That disco, it might have burned bright and hot and died out quickly and people make fun of it, but like it is the source, it is the reason we have everything we have today in electronic dance music. So
Chicago dance music pioneer called it disco's revenge.
Yeah. So we have to give credit to disco, because we wouldn't have all of this without it. We definitely wouldn't have acid house without disco. So that is the sort of creative component to what this album was. So 10 ragas to a disco beat. He went to a small studio in Mumbai to record it, and it was put out by, I think it was called Gramophone Records.
Which is interesting, because that's the name of the house music record store in Chicago.
Oh, what?
Yeah. Isn't that wild? I just obviously put that together just now, but...
Gramophone Company. Okay. Yeah. I had this up already.
That's crazy. I mean, Gramophone...
It's now known as Saragama, but it was formerly known as the Gramophone Company of India.
Huh.
So that is fascinating. So they put it out in 1982 and it was a flop. End of story, right?
Wrong.
He spent a year, he thought he was innovating. It was a total flop. Nobody in India cared about it. Nobody heard about it. It didn't make him famous at the time. But something weird happened where it got to Europe. I don't know how. This is another mystery if anybody knows. That somehow it made its way to Europe, and in 2002, someone discovered it and gave it new life. And I found this really interesting, because this is kind of part of the myth, right, of the story of how he's the accidental father of acid house.
Didn't it get like one placement or something, like locally?
Oh, no, you're right. I wrote this down. Again, Bombay is what it was called at the time. Bombay Radio was using one of his songs as like an interlude on the radio station. So like between songs, or like, I guess like commercial transitions, one of the tracks was being used. But that, they weren't saying... They weren't like playing the track. Yeah. It wasn't on rotation. They weren't saying who made it or anything like that.
Even by today's standards, that'd be a pretty minor placement.
Yeah, so, he did try to... Before I go into the future too much, he did make another album after this called Experiments in Calypso, which I cannot find anything about, except it's sometimes called India Goes Calypso. And I found somebody on YouTube who had uploaded it, and I listened to that, and that again was like calypso renditions of Bollywood songs.
I want to hear that. I haven't heard
crazy. It's just like a lot of conga, and then like crazy, like cheesy synthesizer, but like you can tell these are like very well crafted songs that are probably like major hits. It's like the hits of Bollywood that everybody would know, but played with synthesizer. And he used the same, Roland Fleet, if you will.
I just want to hear it out of curiosity.
Yeah, you should listen to it. I listened to it, and it was like a happy vibe, but it was also kind of like, okay, I feel like I'm at a circus after a while. So yeah, he was a session musician throughout all of this, and then after this kind of flop era that he had, where he thought nobody cared, he then put together like his own sort of like, he just became kind of like a cover band of his own stuff, like all the music that he was a session musician for, and he would go out and play weddings and play events, and like I saw him and his wife talking about how they love to come to the US because they made so much more money at private parties there playing the Bollywood stuff.
He had a child. At least one, right?
Well, in the documentary I saw of them from 2010, she said we never had children. But in Wikipedia, it says they had a child. So I'm confused about that. If she's saying we never had children, but he has a child, I'm not sure how that math adds up.
There's a little mystery there.
There's a mystery there, for sure. I
had thought that he had a child, so I don't know where I got that from.
Yeah, again, it's confusing. There's no, like, definitive, book written about him yet that I know of. So I was just trying to piece things together from here and there that I could find.
It just sounds like he gave up a little bit. Based on
it sounds like that, but he seemed really happy.
I'm not saying he wasn't happy. I'm saying he kind of hung up the music and pursued other avenues.
He hung up the 10 Ragas to a disco beat. He hung up the inventing acid house stuff that he was doing. And he went back to his kind of traditional roots. Yeah. Because that's what he was getting hired to do. So he was, like, I guess, an offshoot of, like, when he was in that group of guys touring worldwide playing the Bollywood music, he just went off and did it himself. So as, like, kind of a solo guy, he was playing around. So from, like, I would say 1990 until, like, 2010, that's what he was doing. And then 2010, he gets, like, a knock on his door from these guys from Europe who have discovered 10 Ragas to a disco beat, and they want to re-release it. So that's kind of the whole timeline there. But what was I gonna say?
They're like, hey, you want to get the band back together?
Oh yeah, okay. So the lore,
the Band of You,
the Band of You. So the lore of it is that in 2002, I think it was like a Dutch DJ, like found his record.
Do we know who?
I will find out.
I'm curious because that is I remember, learning that it was a Dutch DJ or Dutch record label owner and producer, but I didn't catch their name.
Ido Bauman.
Okay. I've not heard of Ido until now.
That must be who was, like, with him.
That's interesting, though. That's cool.
Anyway, the thing that I thought was really interesting is that they say Ido Bauman, I'm assuming, is the person who discovered it in 2002, like, crate digging, like, found it, and then kind of was, like, I guess eventually created a record label and reached out to him and, like, created this whole
He was the one that did something about it,
to least. Like, re-release it, give it its moment. Now, this is why everybody knows about it, is because of the 2010 re-release that they did. And then he went with him, got him all the old instruments back, and they went on tour in 2013 all over Europe. And, like, so that's really, really cool. But what I thought was really crazy is I found this old blog post from 2002 that is not tied to this Dutch DJ at all. Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, cool.
Where did I put this link in here because I didn't want to lose it.
So it had nothing to do with Ido.
Shoot. Did I not save it?
At all. Like, this...
Shoot. It was when I was trying to find experiments in Calypso.
So it had nothing to do with him, huh?
No, that's what I thought. It was so crazy. So I found this old blog post.
So someone else.
From 2002. It was like someone who was like finding cool music since 1994 and posting about it on the internet, And I'm wondering if I can find it again. Oh my gosh.
So another Discog scavenger.
And maybe I need to put Charanjit Singh.
Another crate digger.
And he was like, I found this record, 10 Ragas to a disco beat, and I want to know if anybody out there knows about it. And people were like, commenting about it. And this was in 2002, and it like wasn't the same guy. So I'm just like, oh, Justin's Links. Okay, this website's literally called Justin Hall's. Justin Hall, if you're out there, I want to hear from you. Justin Hall's personal site, growing and breaking down since 1994.
I thought his name was Justin's Links.
Justin's Links. No, Justin's Links. Justin Hall. So it says, this is October 2002. I find this. It's like Wayback Machine type stuff. Hello, this is a fan page for Charanjit Singh. I have a recording of the second side of his album, 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat. It is my ideal music. I know nothing about him. This album was made in 1983, perhaps. My friend Ryan has a copy. Please email me if you know anything about him or his music, and here you can download. It's one of the tracks. And enjoy this fine noodling sound. The music is nuanced while repetitive, electronic but warm and full. It seeks and it fills. It is perfect to work to, but you can lose your mind within it. It is powerful and gentle. 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat is my best album to hear now. Fall of 2002.
Wow.
And then somebody else responded and said, I don't know much about him either. I'm not sure who does. From what I recall, he performed on soundtracks in the 70s. And those cheesy farfisa accordions were really popular in Hindi film music at the time. And that was him doing that. If you heard cheesy farfisa accordion, that was...
Kiss your mother with that mouth.
That was
What are you
Charanjit
calling
Singh.
cheesy?
There's a picture of him holding one of those. But I don't remember whether he played that or guitar or both. It was both. He used steel guitar through an Echoplex on several cuts too. And there was one album of his film tunes that was commonly found in Indian shops in the late 70s. I probably still have it somewhere.
The Echoplex, huh? That's a cherished tape delay.
Yeah, that's really cool. See, I see he was probably... So he's mostly a guitar player, guitar and bass. And so he was probably bringing in those kind of experimental sounds through guitar, and that probably led him to the synthesizer stuff.
He's always looking to do something a little bit different.
Yeah.
So he was always experimenting.
So then this guy says the Ten Ragas record isn't one I've ever spotted, though. Your MP3 cut refers to a well-known raga, and we can get into that later. I guess CS's disco versions of familiar Hindustani classical rags are comparable to some, other people who covered, the Beethoven, but synthesizer and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to bring that up at some point, but it does seem sort of like...
Oh, and it says, and Michael B. found these experiments in Calypso, which is the thing I was looking for. Justin's Links by Justin Hall. So, Justin, if you're out there, if you ever come across this, seems like you're a big fan, we'd love to know how you knew about this in 2002, when nobody but Ido Bauman, a Dutch DJ and record collector, knew about it. Isn't that cool? That was one of my favorite cosmic things I found.
I'm hearing some similarities to the Switched On Bach record, in a sense.
Yes. Except this was more dance music because he was doing it to a disco beat. So inherently, it was more for the dance floor, whereas the Switched On Bach was not at all.
But my point is that classical music is relatable. It exists.
Yes.
People can latch on to it. People know what they're hearing when they hear it. Similar to, at the time at least, disco music.
Yeah, no, it's right. It was
very popular.
The idea of trying to introduce electronic instruments into the mainstream was take something people are already really familiar with and then use. So he did that same thing. So it makes me wonder if he knew about Wendy Carlos. That would be so crazy to find out. If it made it all the way to India from... it could have. All right, I think that was all of my exciting things that I wanted to share.
All of the excitement.
Outside of talking about... So in 2010, Ido Bauman, on his Bombay Connection Dutch label, reached out to him and re-released Ten Ragas to a Disco Beat and then took him on tour, like we said. There's a ton of these little clips of him on tour during this time, and you can see him. He is improvising. That was another thing. I read an interview with him where he was talking about how much fun it was to play to these young crowds in Europe.
How big were the crowds?
Sometimes up to 10,000 people.
So, every night?
I don't know if they were playing every night, but they did a tour.
Okay, but the crowds were that big every time, or were there
I think it varied.
Okay, so sometimes a medium crowd.
Sure.
Other times,
but other times big festival.
Like a festival type thing. Okay.
And he did say he was improvising still. He wasn't just playing the exact track. He wasn't press and play on the vinyl or anything like that. They were actually using the original instruments. I'm sure they cost a lot more. Or maybe they cost the same, because they cost a lot at first, then they devalued, and then they cost a lot again. So that he could, get familiar with them again. But tell the story you were going to tell about the Jupiter 8 having a drum machine.
Oh, yeah. So I think when Ido Bauman first started helping him reacquire the trinity of instruments so that he could get back on the road and play these shows, I think that he just said I had the Jupiter 8 and it had these cool drum sounds in it, and so I just took that and played over them, and they were wait it wasn't quite that simple. You actually had a couple a few machines And, he probably remembered the TB303 because, like, that was such a, something he had to program. And probably, as we all know, the sequencer in that thing is a really hard sequencer to get familiar with. Like, it's got, like, probably one of the worst, like, UIs to get familiar with out of, like, most sequencers that I've tried, at least. And so, he remembered that one. But he thought that the Jupiter 8 had an 808 in it. And they were eventually able to convince him, obviously, like, well, fine, make it do 808 then, like, I guess he eventually came to terms with the fact that it didn't have it in there and that he needed another machine. And at some point he must have, like, had an aha moment.
Yeah, so he had to get reintroduced to those instruments and, like, reprogram them and everything. And then they played these shows, and it was like, he passed away in 2015, so, like, this all happened.
Touring killed him.
It was just that he, like, transcended, like, he got to this level again with his own music where something he was so passionate about. Like I said, I read this interview where somebody was like, people say you're the accidental father of acid house, and he's like, no, I worked really intentionally on what I was crafting. Like, I had a very intentional plan, and I worked very intentionally, like we discussed, about it. And so when it was a flop, I think he was pretty heartbroken. And so for it to come back around again, a new generation of people rediscovering it and telling him, like, no, we love what you did. We love it. We, like, are inspired by it. It's like it's a part of a bigger story of house music to us. And, like, we want to hear it live from you. Like, that must have been so cool for him to have that experience.
Have you thought about where you stand in terms of believing that he is truly the godfather of acid house music?
I would say that we can't say that just because he has never called it that, and he wasn't part of that scene, if you will. So I would say that yes, that album is the origins of acid house, but he is not the father of acid house because he didn't nurture the scene and the movement and the genre. But I would say, yes, he invented it.
But, from what I know, house music was sort of like, something that was created out of thin air by the people in Chicago. The term house music... are you going to answer your own question then? How you feel about it? I guess I'm getting into that a little bit. From what I understand, comes from a particular venue that it was being played at,
right,
that just happened to be called the Warehouse,
right.
And other people think that's all of this stuff, that people have differing opinions. People have differing opinions about whether or not Charanjit is the godfather of acid house music. People have differing opinions on like where the name house music came from, but the popular opinion is that it came from the fact that it was being played at the Warehouse. Anyway, where I was going with this is that I kind of also agree with, I would say, the majority, which is that to call him the godfather of a genre that he didn't even realize existed until several years after its invention, would be a little bit hard-pressed. But, I do think that his inspiration to play the instruments the way that he played them, to use the beat and the 303 in the way that he did while he, like, tweaked, the settings, that those are definitely elements of acid house. I don't think many people could argue that. But I think it's more about the intentionality and the output, like how was he intending, he was just making a record, the vision that he had, and, he was hoping that, people would enjoy, this take on the traditional music, whereas I think the founders of acid house music in Chicago were very intentionally making music for people to dance and possibly have relations to.
And they were in conversation with the audience too. That's why I say he's not nurturing a scene. Like, they were making the music, playing it for people, and, like, getting real-time feedback from the audience about it. and then making more.
They were hoping that, they were handing it to DJs, that were playing the clubs, that they were hoping that it would get played at, and, I feel like that intentionality and, the fact that it, happened, that their vision that it was going to be this, like genre of music, if all things went well, whereas Charanjit didn't have that intention.
No.
Like, he was just trying to make a record.
But I think we can have a deeper conversation about it, because if you're in the Vortex, we are going to do an extended version where we're going to now listen to the album together and talk about it more and talk about the different ragas that, like, what they mean. So we can talk about, like, the themes that he was playing with, and then you can decide if you agree with us or not, and if you want to add this album to your repertoire of stuff you listen to. I think you should. And that's going to be fun to do, on the other side of this. This is like, for everybody, and then we're going to do that kind of privately for our Vortex members. So if you want to join the Vortex, you will be able to get access to this as well. So we're going to go deeper into that. And before we do close this out, I want to say Alex Ball on YouTube made an amazing video about this, and he goes deeper into the instrumentation, and like there's like a lot of threads that I feel like he really nailed, and I didn't want to like steal those ideas or bring them up or hammer them, because he already did such a good job on that. So I highly recommend watching his video. He
like recreates one of the songs, right?
The way he talks about like why the 303 was like such a perfect instrument for his idea of the ragas to a disco beat, like he gets really in depth with it, and I think that everyone should watch that video too. Thought that was really dope. So yeah, this was really fun for us. I got really, really inspired again about these cosmic connections and cosmic conversations, and like theorizing and philosophizing about music creation and history, and like how it inspires us today. And like there's this improv element to what he's doing, and that's really what we're excited by. So I was just like so happy to dive into this again and get the opportunity to have this conversation. So I hope everybody enjoyed it and has a lot to share with us as well about what they know or what they think about it.
Is it safe to say that we may continue the conversation around the origins of house music?
We may. I guess we'll leave that to the audience. If you guys want to hear more, if you want us to take it, into the future a little bit, if you want us to take it back to Chicago, let us know. We're happy to do that as well.
You want us to cover Chicago and Detroit?
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys about it. We'll be seeing you in the Vortex. If you want to join us there, we're going to go listen to 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat.